Humanity sets the agenda.
The time is just 8:36 a.m. as we continue with our broadcast this morning right here on Assalam Media. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show on the various platforms of Salam Media. It's time now to talk to the National Association of Democratic Lawyers of South Africa, and they've issued a statement expressing their full support for the people of Palestine in their just struggle against occupation and oppression by apartheid Israel. And we're going now to be joined by NADEL President Mvuso Notyesi. Mvuso, good morning to you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, and good morning to the listeners. Thank you.
Yes, just looking at the statement, and obviously the statement has been widely shared. I've seen it a lot on social media, looking at the National Association of Democratic Lawyers of South Africa, the support that you are expressing for the people of Palestine, and just looking at it from your perspective, from your organization's perspective, how do you see what has been playing out in Palestine and Gaza in particular?
Um, First and foremost, one has to understand this within this context. The people of Palestine have been oppressed over decades and decades. Have been subjected to to various forms of violence, killing of children and women, and all the vulnerable. And all on the simplest demand that the Palestinians are making, because the Palestinians are demanding to exercise their right of self-determination. And in response to that demand, which is an international recognized, is an international entrenched right, freedom of self-determination, the response by the Israeli state is to unleash brutality, is to murder children, rape, and all atrocities, all crimes against humanity that are taking place. So we say the international world must stand up and object to the actions, to the aggressive actions of the Israeli state. And all of us, we must demand for the liberation of Palestine. And that demand is within the context of international law.
Well, definitely. In fact, also this was going to be my leading question in terms of international legal, ramifications and consequences, and what does international law actually say? And you being the president and a representative of members of the legal profession, this has been a major talking point. The legal justification for what Israel is doing, but also more importantly, or the legal consequences and looking at the world and how selective the world is in terms of applying international law. We know the much talked about Russian invasion of the Ukraine, where international law was a justification to isolate Russia and to take the necessary action against Russia and the support for Ukraine. But again, when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to even some of the other areas around the world, we find that this is lacking in application of international law.
In fact, this is what put into question. Uh, the, the authority or the strength of the United Nations, in terms of dealing with the crimes against humanity. For instance, everyone accepts that the ongoing actions of the Israel regime over the past years on their own constitute violation of international law, and that includes the imposition of apartheid policies upon the Palestinian people. And as we know, apartheid was declared by the United Nations long time ago as a crime against humanity on its own. Now, the acts that are perpetrated on a daily basis over decades, they constitute crimes of genocide, where there's actually an attempt to cleanse the Palestinian people, especially in the Gaza area and West Bank. Now, the point is, if it was another country, there was no differentiation and biasness. Certainly, Israel government leaders and the military commanders would have been indicted in terms of the International Criminal Court of Justice, would have been called to that, but there's simply no such action. Also, Israel should have been called to account by the violation of this grave violation of human rights. But seemingly, there is no appetite on the superpowers. Therefore, it shows the flawed nature of the structure of the United Nations and the powers within the Security Council, where they would simply veto rights by superpowers. This is one area that the international world has to look upon in terms of saying, how is the UN itself, the structures within the UN are transformed? Because now it seems to be a weapon that is used against those that are weak, those that are weak. In this case, Palestine, we accept that there is genocide that is happening against the Palestinians, but there's nothing that is done. So that's why NADEL is calling upon all the people of the world to rally behind and give solidarity to the people of to the Palestinians.
Yes, Mvuso, but also just to illustrate the extent of the duplicity and the hypocrisy from the rest of the world. During the Ukraine invasion, we've seen it right across the entire world as to how the world had rallied behind Ukraine, to the extent that the Ukraine flag was flown very, very high at major sporting events, and all of this was promoted. And we look at the reaction of the international world now, and to the point where they are now legally, they are using laws to take action against people flying Palestinian symbols, showing solidarity with Palestine, the flying of the Palestinian flag. We see this in the UK as well, where a directive was issued that no Palestinian flag would be flown during any of the sporting games. We see France criminalizing the support for Palestine, threatening with 5-year jail sentences. Now, all of this is playing out in Western Europe, which again highlights the hypocrisy, the duplicity. On the one hand, you encourage people to fly the Ukrainian flag, make the Ukrainian case known to the entire world. On the other side, you're criminalizing people just for supporting Palestine.
Exactly. This is exactly the hypocrisy. That we're talking about, that we outline in our statement. Especially, this sort of is a support of the act of imperialism and apartheid domination that is perpetrated against the Palestinians by Israel, with the full support of the Western countries. In Ukraine, we know. Whilst we do not condone such the actions, even if it is in Ukraine, in Russia, and we do not condone or support acts of violence. But what we simply say is that there must be equal response in terms of these matters. But as you say, when it comes to Ukraine, every effort is done, sending weapons, sending billions of rands in support of the Ukrainians. And then when it comes to Palestinians, the West has been so quiet. And all of a sudden, since the events of Saturday, 7th, there is an attempt to cleanse. Gaza is closed down. The Western countries are promising to send weapons. Those weapons will be used against civilians, will be used against unarmed children, women. This is the hypocrisy that we're talking about. And therefore, there is an every breach of international law and the resolutions of the international of the United Nations. This is why we say at this stage we call on every on all people of the world to stand in support of the Palestinians at this demanding moment. And this violence will never end until the people of Palestine are liberated. Because everybody understands what is the serious problem, what is the context. The context is the continued oppressions of the Palestinians in their own land, where they are dominated by foreigners. They are tortured and all forms of brutality is meted out against them.
Just finally, Mvuso, looking at South Africa, I know you've made a call on the South African government in this press release of yours, and obviously telling the government to continue supporting the people of Palestine, but also to pursue international legal mechanisms.
Yes. In this instance, we are asking the South African government, as it has at least adopted a positive position with regard to Palestinians, the liberation and the struggle of the Palestinians. We're saying the South African government should have this matter raised within the context of the United Nations and other institutions such as the International Criminal Court. I think a case has to be made against Israel leaders and military commanders who are in the forefront of this act of violence. Therefore, we believe that if the South African government can lead in that area, there might be a change that would be a positive contribution. Because at the end of the day, Israel and its leaders and the army, they must be held to account in respect of their genocidal actions that are committed against the people of Palestine.
Well, Mvuso, thank you very much for that and for taking time out this morning talking to us right here on Sana Media. All the best to you. Please take care.
Thank you.
The NADEL President Mvuso Notyesi with us this morning, and this is the National Association of Democratic Lawyers calling upon the people of the world to express their solidarity with the people of Palestine.
Word-of-mouth testimonies from our colonizers are awarded front-page headlines, breaking news, and mass hysteria. Meanwhile, video footage of our children being slaughtered, being bombarded, being pulled out of the rubble will never receive the same attention. Even footage of Israelis urinating and stomping on the dead bodies of Palestinians did not receive any of this media coverage. Western newspapers work overtime to elicit sympathy for settlers while painting Palestinians as terrorists. The Palestinians whose very lands these settlers have stolen and now live on. Journalists spread this misinformation, often willingly, to decontextualize decades and decades of brutality and siege. Western newspapers will not tell you about the massacres committed by the Israeli military. Zionism is always justifiable in their eyes. Settlers can kill, kidnap, and steal, as well as institutionally monopolize violence as if it's business as usual. But dare a Palestinian resist? It's clear that the international community and the Western world has no problem with violence, only a problem with the perpetrators of that violence, who gets to monopolize, who has the authority to enact that violence. In addition to all of this, there is almost no international reporters on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the Palestinians in the besieged enclave have to deal with not only there not being any electricity because the Israelis have targeted electricity, but being personally targeted by airstrike. At the time of recording this video, 7 Palestinian journalists have been murdered by Israeli airstrikes since the beginning of the onslaught on the Gaza Strip. This very erasure is part of the reason why Palestinians resist. Mass media is preemptively conditioning you to write a blank check for Israeli genocide. This is straight out of the playbook. They make up a lie, there is no evidence for it, journalists spread it like wildfire, diplomats and politicians repeat it, then a narrative is made. The general public believes it, the harm is done, and they might later admit that it never happened. But you do not have to be complicit in this. You do not have to justify their genocide. They are readying to wipe Gaza off of the face of the earth, and the time to mobilize support for the Palestinian cause is now.